Our last witness on our first panel is Representative Ilhan Omar. She represents the 5th Congressional District of Minnesota, also known as the home of Prince. Includes Minneapolis with the Twins and a big mall and surrounding suburbs. She was sworn into office in January 2019, making her the first African refugee to become a member of Congress, the first woman of color to represent the state of Minnesota, and one of the first 2 Muslim American women elected to Congress. Representative Omar, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman, Ranking Member, and distinguished members of this committee. Thank you for holding this very important hearing. I'm no stranger to discrimination, hate speech, or threats of violence against my family and myself simply because of my identity. As a Black, visibly Muslim woman who came to this country as a refugee, I have dealt with racist, xenophobic, bigoted comments and threats all my life. Even being elected to offices hasn't stopped me from being othered. I've received vile remarks from the public as well as members of Congress. Sadly, I am just one of millions of Americans across this country who have experienced discrimination and attacks. In recent years, we've witnessed increased attacks on Asian Americans, immigrant communities, religious minorities in spaces, and that's only a fraction of violence. It is demoralizing to watch acts of such blatant racism and xenophobia all carried out with complete disregard for the humanity of others. Sadly, our government has a history of sanctioning such hatred and violence. In 1798, President John Adams signed into law a set of 4 bills collectively known as the Alien Sedition Act. These 4 bills increased the residency requirement for American citizenship from 5 years to 14 years, authorizing the president to imprison or deport foreign nationals considered dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States and restricting speech critical of the government. These laws were designed to restrict the activities of foreign-born Americans, silence minorities, and weaken freedom of speech and the press. By 1801, 3 of the acts were repealed due to its unconstitutional nature or allowed to expire. However, the Alien Enemies Act remains in effect to this day, even though it is unconstitutional as the other 3. The Alien American Act allows the United States President to determine how and if all foreign nationals should be apprehended, restrained, secured, and removed in the event of a war. There are a number of troubling and scary aspects of this law. First, war is not defined in this act, allowing it to be loosely interpreted. Second, this act completely bypassed the judicial process, ignoring due process and the right of appeal. And lastly, foreign national refers to anyone who's not a US citizen, even if they might be a lawful resident in the United States. Meaning, even if you have lived in the United States legally for 20 years, built a community, started a family, for whatever reason not have gained citizenship, you would be subject to apprehension, detention, or deportation without due process. I introduced the Neighbors Not Enemies Act to repeal this unjust law. And while many might say this 18th century law is outdated and has no impact on modern history, I would like to remind you that less than 100 years ago, the United States invoked this act during World War II to detain and subsequently deport Japanese, German, and Italian immigrants. Just last week, we marked the 80th anniversary of the executive order signed by President Franklin Roosevelt, which led to mass incarceration of nearly 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry. In the years since, the United States has recognized injustices done to the Japanese American and subsequently apologized for the cruel internment. Although we promised to never walk down that dark path again, we failed to keep that promise. During the 2016 election, President Trump used the Alien Enemies Act as a justification for the Muslim ban. Administration after administration have continuously demonstrated the danger of unchecked executive power and stain it has on our countries decades and centuries later. Whether it is justifying putting hundreds of thousands of people in internment camps, attacking Muslim immigrants and refugees, or separating families at the border, The Alien Enemies Act dangerously permits the president extreme executive powers to unjustly target an entire group of foreign nationals. This outdated and xenophobic law is an offense to our nation's values. We must learn from historic mistakes based on fear of the other and embrace a system of freedom and equality by passing the Neighbors Not Enemies Act. Thank you, Chairman.